All right. All right. We thank you guys for joining us again today. I pray everybody had an awesome 4th of July celebration. Maybe some of y'all are still on vacation. But we're going to get it started here today. Man, I'm excited to continue to walk into this armor, man. And, the Lord is, again, he's constantly revealing so much more in his word. And I just want to remind you, be thankful that God never stops in his revelation, that his revelation is always getting higher and higher. That means he's always moving us higher and higher. And so we're going to dig further into the armor right now. And today we're going to talk about peace and the shoes of the gospel of peace. Okay. And so I'm going to kind of go to two different aspects of it. First is we talk about peace, because we were in Ephesians 6, okay? And we looked at the Message translation, just to kind of go through those words that they talked about, that it talks about, as it kind of gives a summary of what each part of the armor of God represents. And we talked about truth already. We talked about righteousness on Wednesday. And so today we're going to talk about peace. And one of the aspects of peace, of course, is wholeness and completeness. But we're going to talk about peace itself for only a few minutes. We have talked about peace before, okay? We have several other teachings that just talk about the force that peace is. And I encourage you to go back and listen to some of those, because peace is not just, it is quietness of the soul. It is rest in your soul, knowing who you are, knowing who God is. But because of that rest, it puts us in a position of authority. It puts us in a place in which we can utilize peace as a force that can quiet the chaos that the enemy wants to bring. It is one thing that God said to me about peace, and that it represents wholeness, completeness. When you break that word down, and there's several versions of it, okay, there's several different words for peace, but they all basically come to the same thing. And prosperity is part of peace. And something that God had said to me about prosperity and peace, he says it takes being at peace to make peaceful decisions about your finances, about other areas in your life. If you think about any bad financial decision you made, you probably made it in a state that you were not at peace. Okay. And he says that of any decision. So it takes a foundation of peace for us to be able to stay in peace, because it really dictates how we make our decisions and how we see what the situation is. And so I'm again, we talked about peace as that force. Everywhere you place your foot, you should bring peace with you, because that is the state of who you are. And again, we talked about peace being the seat of your authority. So I'll link some of those previous discussions here when we repost the video. But I want to talk now about the wording of Ephesians 6:15. We're going to go in the amplified version of that to begin with, Ephesians 6:15. And it says, having strapped on your feet the gospel of peace in preparation. And here it says, to face the enemy with firm-footed stability and readiness produced by the good news. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when I read that over the years, when I see it, it's like, okay. But what does that really mean? What does it mean to have on spiritual shoes? Okay, because this is spiritual armor here. This is God's armor. And so if we dig a little bit deeper here, let's talk a little bit about what that actually means. What does it mean to have the gospel of peace strapped on you as shoes would be? Now, ladies, I'm sure you men can relate as well, but it does not pay to have the wrong kind of shoes on in the wrong situation. Okay. All right. It does not pay to have heels on when you have to walk a couple miles. Okay. Right. And I'm sure men are the same. Y'all have dress shoes that you don't need to go running no marathon in. Okay. The right type of shoe is critical, and I think that's something that we have to think about as we explore this verse here. First off, you got to understand, what is the gospel of peace? What is the gospel of peace? You see, he's not just talking about, this is actually talking about um the message that Jesus gave as he was here on earth. This is not about the scriptures in its entirety. Okay. So first I want you to, let's narrow our focus down. It says, strapped to your feet is the gospel of peace. Well, what's the gospel of peace? It's the good news. It's everything that Jesus preached. Okay. So Matthew 4:23, let's take a look at that. And again, I'm still in Amplified here. Matthew 4:23. And it says, and he went throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the good news, gospel of the kingdom, and healing every kind of disease and every kind of sickness among the people, demonstrating and revealing that he was indeed the promised Messiah. So here's the part that we got to get excited about, that's strapped on our feet, is the message that Jesus is the Messiah, that the kingdom is here. Okay. The kingdom is here, and that this right here, because if we pop back up to where we were just in Ephesians in the Amplified, it says that gospel of peace allows us to be prepared to face the enemy with firm-footed stability and readiness. You see, he's saying that this message that Jesus preached is the thing that should be able to ground you when you have to face the enemy. It makes you sure-footed, that I know not just who Jesus is, that I am sure in my salvation, that I know everything he paid for on that cross belongs to me, that this picture of Jesus, this life of Jesus, that right there is what creates sure footing for me. That's what creates sure footing for me. Now, I want you to think about this. The sandals that they're talking about. Now, listen, there's a lot of different kind of sandals. We got flip-flops. Okay. You got sandals that, that are heels. You got mules. You got the sandals that lace all the way up your legs. Listen, they didn't have all that back then. Okay. The sandals that are actually really referred to here are the Roman soldier sandals. Okay. And if you ever see any pictures of those sandals, and in contrast, they were much thicker than what normal people wore. Okay. And in studies, I was reading where they had, little spikes on the bottom of them. And kind of like I think about cleats, that football players use. Those spikes were there to help them keep their footing in battle. Okay. That's the sandals they're talking about here, not your flip-flops. Okay. Not these were, it was a specific type of shoe that was made for battle. And God is saying that my story of my son, that the story of Jesus is likened to those sandals that could dig into the ground and make sure that you weren't moved unless you were ready to be moved, and make sure that as you take more steps, you didn't have to necessarily worry about what you were stepping on and where you were stepping, because they gave you the footing. They gave you the stability that you needed. And that's his gospel. That's his story. So these sandals weren't just any average sandals. They were thick. They were designed to hold your ground. If you've ever played football or watched football players, you can see how those spikes come in handy, because without it, listen, I've watched my sons practice without cleats and with cleats. Okay. We've seen them run drills on that field, and he didn't have his cleats on. I mean, you talking about kids slipping and sliding everywhere. Okay. They can't stand their ground. They can't stand their ground. They can't run those drills like they're supposed to without those cleats. They're making all kind of mistakes. Matter of fact, it makes them look like a worse player than what they are. And the difference is in the shoes. You see, and so these shoes, first of all, the thought of us having shoes to wear as part of our armor, it indicates that you are expected to be in motion. You're expected to be in motion. You know, if I'm laying in my bed or I'm sitting on my couch watching TV, I don't need to have my shoes on. I'm not going anywhere. My question is, are your spiritual shoes on? Are you ready? Are you ready? You see, in Romans 10:15-18, okay, and I'm in the passion here. And I'm not talking about readiness as, oh, but Jacinta, I wasn't supposed to be a pastor. God didn't put me here as a pastor. He didn't put me here as a, quote unquote minister. No, but you all, every single one of us have assignments here. It doesn't matter what the capacity is. And see, Romans 10:15-18 says this, but how can people call on him for help if they have not believed? And how can they believe in one they have not yet heard of? And how can they hear the message of life if there is no one there to proclaim it? And how can the message be proclaimed if messengers have yet to be sent? That's why the scripture said, how welcome is the arrival of those proclaiming the joyful news of peace and of good tidings to come. But not everyone welcomes the good news, as Isaiah said. Lord, is there anyone who hears and believes our message? Faith then is birthed in a heart that responds to God's anointed utterance of the anointed one. Can it be that Israel hasn't heard the message? No, they have heard it, for the voice has been heard throughout the world, and his message has gone to the ends of the earth. You see, it's talking about here, it's saying that, listen, how does anybody know this message if there's nobody that's been sent to tell them? And it's not just the pastors, it's not just the ministers, it's not just the teachers, it's every single one of us, because this armor wasn't just dictated and said, those of you, now that you listen up, those of y'all in the fivefold ministry, this armor is only for you. Does it say that? No. This armor is for everybody. So that tells me that everybody has an assignment that requires shoes on, and that those shoes be this exciting message of Jesus, that thing that grounds you and that thing that moves you forward is the message of what Jesus preached. You see, what Romans is referring to here is something in Isaiah. Here's the thing, we all and everybody has an assignment. You have a capacity to preach this message. Okay, let's look at this message very similar to what Jesus said. Let's look at Luke 4:16-21. Okay, we all have this message in some capacity. Some of us preach this through helping people in their finances. Some people preach this message in helping people, with business strategy. There are people, everybody has a different facet of this right here. Luke 14:16-21. It says, when he came to Nazareth, where he had grown up, he went to the synagogue as he always did on the Sabbath. When Jesus came to the front to read the scriptures, he was handed the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He unrolled the scroll and found where it was written, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and he has anointed me to be hope for the poor, healing for the brokenhearted, and new eyes for the blind, and to preach to prisoners, you are set free. I have come to share the message of Jubilee, for the time of God's great acceptance has begun. After he read this, he rolled up the scroll, handed it back to the attendant, and sat down. Everyone stared at Jesus, wondering what he was about to say. Then he added, then he did a mic drop. He handed them the scroll, and then he goes, today these scriptures came true in front of you. Drops the mic. Okay. He drops the mic. He's saying, here's who I am. Jubilee is now. Okay. And that this is what I do. I set people free. I give them new eyes. You see, I preach, it says the hope for the poor, healing for the brokenhearted. You see, all of us have this message, this capacity for some part of this, if not all of this, in anything that you do, whatever God has you set your hands to, whatever he has you building, is some facet of this message right here. And that's the good news. That's the gospel of the good news. And that is the thing that's supposed to ground me. Does it matter if someone accepts it or not? No, because see, those are the things that get us off keel. Those are the things that make us question, was I supposed to be the one to bear this message? That's what the enemy wants you to do. But this is what he means by having those shoes with the spikes, that this message is the thing that grounds you. So whether they accept the message or not, which we just read in Romans, said Isaiah said, Lord, who's listening? Ain't nobody listening. Okay. You see, that's not supposed to push you off your ground. That's not supposed to make you waver, because your shoes are dug in too deep by this gospel of peace, by this message, this word of God. And so in that Romans passage, it is referencing a passage in Isaiah 52:7. Okay, it says, what a beautiful sight to behold, the precious feet of the messenger coming over the mountains to announce good news. He comes to refresh us with wonderful news, announcing salvation to Zion and saying, your mighty God reigns. See, it says, beautiful are the feet, precious are the feet. He's talking about how God values you, how the world of the spirit sees you as a person who comes and announces this good news that says, I'm here to tell you you're free. I'm here to tell you you don't have to be bound by mistakes of the past. I'm here to give you new eyes to be able to see your financial situation, to see that you can be debt free, to see that you can leave an inheritance. You see, that may be the realm you're in. Maybe there's another, but see, the bottom line is he calls you beautiful. He calls your feet beautiful because they are covered by the gospel of peace. And so, shoes, as we close here today, shoes have a lot to do with the type of motion that you're in and the momentum that you can gain in that motion. Again, I can't go run a marathon in heels. Okay. We women, we are notorious for buying shoes that do not feel good, but they're cute. Okay. I stopped doing that in my early 30s. Okay, them things will give you back problems. All right, they were cute, they look good. But I can't do much in them. I can't be in them more than 5 minutes. I can't gather any momentum in shoes like that. You see? And so what he's telling us here is that the shoes, that message of God, the assignment, this part of Luke here, that I was put here to preach, that I was sent here to talk about. Because how are people going to know they can live debt free unless somebody tells them? How are they going to know that they can leave an inheritance unless somebody tells them? You see, and so that thing right there, that I was put here, that you were put here, that part of the message, that's what you strap on your feet. That's what holds you in your ground, because that right there is the gospel that Jesus came here for, and that he passed that assignment on to you. You got to have the right shoes on if you're going to continue in your journey. You got to have the right shoes on. So I ask you, how does this gospel ground you? Has it grounded you to this point? Do you understand your assignment? And does that add to those spikes that are at the bottom of your shoes that makes you not back down when the enemy tries to push against you, and that allows you to barrel your way forward You see those guys, like my son, they're playing the offensive, and he has to push somebody back. It's those spikes in those shoes that help give him some leverage. So when he takes a step forward, they can't push him back. You see, that has a lot to do with him standing his ground. Do you do that? Do you use your shoes that way? Do you use the assignment that God has given you that way, to not allow yourself to be pushed back and to keep pushing forward and gain momentum? You see, that is the shoes of the gospel of peace, right? So, amen. Amen. Here we go.